What's up, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Revive Outdoors. I am grateful that you are here for this episode because this is going to be probably one of the most pivotal episodes that you ever listen to when it comes to being a deer hunter. This is something that I didn't learn and start paying attention to until about 4 or 5 years ago, and it has been absolutely just revolutionary in my deer hunting experience. I have seen more deer. I have put myself in better situations to have success. Coming off what I feel was my best understanding of wind and thermals last year, killed 5 bucks in 5 different states. A few of them were on public land, a couple were on private, and killed one with a crossbow, one with a rifle, one with the straight wall cartridge 350 Legend, one with my pistol, and then let's see, where was the other one? That one was with my crossbow as well. And so just had an incredible season, but without understanding wind and thermals and how those work together or against each other, or how they work for you or against you, is very important. So I'm excited to share all the details and my understanding of it. There's not a lot of clear communication and understanding from a baseline standpoint when it comes to wind and thermals. There's a lot of let's say, lingo that you hear around the industry, like thermal hubs, or oh, my thermals were doing this, or my thermals are doing that. And some things are fact, and some things are what I would say are regurgitation of what people have heard from someone else, and they don't truly understand it. So my job today, that I feel that I am called to help you with, is help you understand the difference between wind and thermals, and then how those two can either work for you or against you when it comes to a successful deer hunt. Things to pay attention to in this episode are that every situation and every setup is different. What the forecast is and what you experience in the woods are two completely different things. So if you're planning to go hunt an area, you better know that if it's calling for a west wind or an east wind, north wind, south wind, you better know when it's calling for that, that it's actually going to do that. Because if you're going off the forecast and you're not checking it when you get there, it could be calling for a north wind. The wind could be blowing north, and the thermals are causing it to do something else, or the way the terrain is running is causing it to do something else. So hopefully I can help you with that. I'm going to throw in some scientific data in another episode in regards to scent control and how that impacts you. So part one will be wind and thermals. Part two will be on scent control, scent products, how scent affects your deer hunting ability. And so these two episodes could be the most important thing that you listen to for the rest of your deer hunting career, but definitely going into this season. So this is something that you want to pay attention to. It's something that you want to take notes on. It's something that you want to listen to time and time again, because this has led to my success. The first thing I'm going to show you right here that I always have on my bino harness is milkweed. If you do not have milkweed, then you need to get it. You can see why I have it is because it floats in the air. It's a really lightweight. I'm pulling out a little bit more than I normally do just so you can visually see it on the screen here, but that is milkweed. It's a plant. It grows up predominantly around north. It doesn't grow in the south a lot. So I actually get milkweed from a guy on eBay for 5 bucks. I have it shipped to me. Before I started traveling out of state, now I pick some pods off and let them dry out when I see them here and there. But what I've done for the longest, not having milkweed around me, is I've just ordered it off of eBay. So you can see in the time that I've been sitting here, the milkweed, maybe you can't, maybe you can, the milkweeds went that way. Now it's going that way. And then at one point in time, it was going this way. Today we're calling for an east wind, which should mean that the wind is blowing consistently this way. The reason it's not doing that is because of a few things. One, you have a little bit of swirling going on. I'm on a ridge top right here, but you have heat. So I'm kind of in a shadow. I have heat to my front, and I have heat over here, and I have heat to my back. So it's going to pull towards that heat as well. But before I get kind of all crazy, I want to make sure this is very structured and streamlined for you. So we're going to cut now to understanding in the difference between wind and a difference between thermals. When it comes to communicating with you about the difference between wind and thermals, One thing I want to make very clear is this is just an easy way for me to understand it, and this is an easy way that I hope that I relay this to you. So, wind is wind. We know where wind comes from. We know what causes the wind. We know what wind is. It's normal. We naturally feel it. It's easy. It's a tangible thing that we can see. You can see the leaves blow. You can see the trees sway. So wind is very self-explanatory. Not going to go into much detail about that. Thermals, on the other hand, can be very confusing, but I want to put it in very simple terms of what it is. So thermal, if you just think of thermals being scent molecules that are in the air or moisture molecules that are in the air, and you think about the process of evaporation, that's really all that is taking place with thermals. So the thermal heating of the earth, when the sun heats the earth, the sun is designed to do what? It's designed to evaporate water. So it will pull water into clouds, and then the clouds, they get heavy basically, and it comes down, right? They can't hold it anymore, and then we have rainfall. And then the rain trickles from the toppest heights of heights all the way down into the lowest of lows, down to the oceans, to the bottom land. Thermals are the same exact thing. So you have evaporation that's taking place. That's why they say that thermals are rising in the morning and they're falling in the evening times. All that's simply happening is that thermals, yes, they rise in the morning times. That is correct. Now, there's a certain part of the morning where it's still cool that they are falling. That's what you hear when you hear the term thermal switch, is they go from falling because it's cool to the sun is now coming up and it's heating the earth's surface and it's causing that to evaporate and pull up. So that is all that's happening, is that thermodynamic heating of the earth is taking place. So that thermal heating of the earth is taking place, and it's causing those molecules in the air. I like to look at them as the water in the air, the moisture molecules in the air. That also includes your scent, the perspiration of your scent is evaporating upwards. And so, if you think of it from that aspect, then it really helps you understand thermals. And then in the evening time, the sun is going down, it's starting to cool off. All of that pull upwards towards the sun through evaporation is now no longer pulling, so therefore it's starting to fall. Now, if you have a lack of heat during the day, like an overcast day, today's been kind of one of those days where it's overcast some and the sun's out in others, or if you're in a thick, dense forest where there's just a lot of shade, you'll have it to where thermals don't play as large of an impact. Another thing that'll happen is that your molecules, the scent, cannot escape through the canopy of the trees at times, and it almost acts as like a roof over top of your scent. So it'll kind of go up, it'll be hit by those trees, and it'll push it back down. So if you just think of as thermals as a moisture molecule that is floating through the air, and it's influenced by wind, and it's influenced by the sun, by the heat, by the cooling, it's really easier to understand versus overcomplicating it. So right here, you can't tell, but I'm on the top 1/3 of a hill that is swaying this way. I've got an east wind that is pushing this direction, is what the forecast is calling for, and it is also calling, it is also happening. So I'm feeling that at times. However, that wind will periodically stop. Right now, it's, as I'm talking, it's starting to pick up a little bit. So I should take this milkweed and it should flow exactly that direction. So what's it doing? It's staying right here with me. So what's happening is when you drop it right around your body, is that wind is whipping around you. And if you've ever seen like swirls in like a parking lot or anything, that's what's happening. It's going around a structure, or it's hitting a structure, and it's calling a swirl. So it'll do the same thing with trees. It'll do the same thing with your body. So when you're pulling out milkweed, I always tell people, reach out and let it get away from your body. So now it's pushing that way. Well, what most people would say, well, you're hunting high, it's hot, the sun's out. That east wind, yes, is blowing that way, but it should be heating up and escaping out the roof. Well, that is not actually true. In some cases it is, but in most cases, what I've seen, it is not. What will actually take place is this will be a cooler area, And so it'll naturally want to fall, and then it's also a downhill area. And so that thermal, that moisture molecule, so to speak, is wanting to fall naturally downhill because it has weight, gravity's taking its place, and it's wanting to slide downhill just like water would want to do. It's not easy for it to climb up the hill unless you have a really strong sun heat pull, which a lot of times in the hardwoods, you just are not going to get that. In ag country and more open areas, you will get that thermal lift and it'll suck that scent out of there, but in most cases, you're not going to get it. That's why a lot of people in the mornings, they hunt high, so they'll hunt way up in a tree and let the sun hit them and escape that scent out of there. It's almost like a vacuum of evaporation. And then the evening times, they'll get in a ground blind and completely close themselves in and try to trap that scent, that thermal evaporation that's no longer happening, try to trap it right there in that blind. And then the goal would be to set up on an edge where it kind of goes down a drainage where you think the deer are not going to be. But that kind of in summary is what the difference in wind and thermals are. So if you just think of thermals as a water molecule that's going to be influenced by the sun and evaporating, then it's really easy to understand. And then having milkweed on you at all times and constantly dropping it throughout your hunt. You know, you may think, if you've ever had a deer that's coming into a trail camera, or a herd of deer that are coming into a trail camera pretty regular, and then all of a sudden you decide you're going to go in and hunt it, and then you don't see anything, and you're like, well, the wind was pushing this way, and it should have just blown them away. I mean, the deer come from this direction, they come into the field. What you may not understand is there's a thermal pull that's happening, and so that evaporation or that water molecule, or however you want to visualize it, is moving that direction. The only way that you're going to find out that that's happening is by dropping milkweed. And so you can see that milkweed, where it was going that way, is now going that way. And so you have to sit in a spot and you have to drop milkweed over and over to understand what the wind is truly doing. So if I'm trying to hunt a specific area that I've never hunted before and I don't understand the dynamics of the wind and how the wind and thermals work together, a lot of times I'll sit there at the base of a tree before I decide which one I want to climb, and I'll just constantly drop milkweed. I might do that for 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. I might do it for an hour. Sometimes you're sitting there and the deer walks up and you shoot it. But what I would recommend is just getting used to just constantly dropping your milkweed. And so just like that, now it's going right back that direction. So overall, what's taking place here is the wind is blowing out of the east and it's going that way. I just had another piece of milkweed float back this direction. What's happening is the predominant wind today is an east wind at 8 miles an hour. It's going this direction. And so as it's going this direction, yes, that is what's happening. But when it cools off, or I mean, when it dies down, it stops doing that. You have the thermals are trying to take over and they're trying to raise that scent or that molecule back up. And so if you don't understand it, the best thing to do is just to drop milkweed over and over until you understand it. And what's really funny is when you start to do that in certain spots that you've hunted before is, hey, the wind might be blowing a hard, 8 miles an hour like it is today, but then it stops and you notice that a milkweed maybe you let go an hour ago comes blowing right back by you the other direction. I've had that happen. And so understanding what's taking place with wind and thermals and their relationships is very helpful. And so what I want to do now is I want to transition and talk about why deer bed, where they bed in relation to wind and thermals, and what are the terms, or what is the term thermal hub? What does it mean, and how can you use that in a positive way, or how it can hurt your hunt? So we'll transition over to that now, and I'll talk about it with you. Okay, what I wanted to do for this portion of the video is I wanted to move down the hill a little bit. And I want to talk about first the term thermal hub and what that means. If you think of a thermal hub, when you think hub, I want you to think tub, like a bathtub. It's an area where the topography has multiple things funneling into it. It creates a bathtub-like effect. It's where those water scent molecules, the thermal molecules from you and everything else around you has settled into a bottom of that bathtub. Naturally, just like water, Water's not going to stay up on the side of the tub. It's going to naturally go down and it's going to form in the bottom of the tub. And so a thermal hub is simply that. A deer can come up a valley, and no matter what the wind is doing, no matter what is going on, then at some point in time during the day, your scent is going to fall down into that valley, and they're going to be able to pick up everything around, every ridge around them. So that's why you see a lot of big bucks that they'll travel these big valley systems, because they can smell everything around it. Because what happens is wind pushes down. So we have that east wind that I was talking about earlier. So in that situation, I just came from up there and the scent was blowing down this way. It's going to roll off down this hill and it's going to hit that bottom, and then it's going to push out that valley, but then it's also going to hit off the wall of that other side, and it's going to start to turn over on itself, and then it's going to hit the side and it's going to hit back and bounce around here, and then it's going to create this bathtub kind of cyclone effect. And then that wind with the thermals and everything is going to just continue to swirl and switch. So that's why people are talking about, man, my scent, the wind was swirling. Yeah, that's what it's going to do, especially in a bottom. Again, a thermal hub just should remind you of a tub. If the topography funnels all to one spot, whether that be a pond, a low area, an indention in the ground, if you're hunting super flat area, there's somewhere where it pulls up. If you don't understand how that works and you hunt predominantly flatlands, get on Spartan Forge's app and increase the topography feature, and it'll rise up everything so you can see where those divots are going to be. A lot of times, if you have a CRP field, you're wondering, like, why is that buck out of all of that right there? Why is that buck right there? It's usually because he can sit in a little small indention and he can catch that scent all the way around him, kind of settling into that like bathtub right there. But that is thermal hubs, that term that gets thrown around a lot. That's a little bit of an explanation of that, and I hope that helps you. Next thing I want to talk Next thing I want to talk about is where deer like to bed. There's two spots they like to bed. They like to bed in those thermal hubs, and then they like to bed on ridge points and in mountain sides. So ridge sides, mountain points, ridge points. I'll highlight that on the topography as I'm speaking. So they'll like to bed around that. The reason is because you have the wind that is taking place. So today, for example, I could probably go through this property like I just did. I bumped a deer earlier when I was coming into here. You will bump deer off of hillsides when the wind is doing this. It's pushing down off of a ridge, so the ridge is running up there and it's pushing down this direction. You will find deer bedded between the top third, middle third, or bottom third, depending on how heavy that wind is. Especially in colder seasons, they're going to bed a little lower on the hill to get out of that wind, but a lot of times those mature bucks are going to bed at what I consider and call the midpoint of the mountain where the wind and the thermals meet. Because what you have taking place, which is why I'm standing in this bed right here, is this is not a heavy wind area traditionally, but on days that it is a heavier wind, where I just bumped the deer off of here, I couldn't tell if it was a buck or a doe, is I have an exit trail right here, I have an exit trail right down where they can go across, and then I have trails running all kinds of sideways through here, and then I have a bed right here with buck hair in it, or with deer hair in it. So the reason deer are going to bed like that on days like today, where you have an 8-mile-an-hour wind coming down off of this mountain, you have thermals that are molecules that are evaporating up the hill when it heats up, what you'll have the thermal rise, and you'll have the wind pushing down, and they'll collide. And on heavier wind days, so say it's a 15-mile-an-hour wind off this hillside, then they might bed lower. If it's a lighter wind, they might bed higher, because they're trying to get where that wind and thermal collision happens. And the reason that they're wanting to do that is because what happens when you have a collision is that energy disperses sideways. So if you have two things that are coming at each other, they're going to hit and they're going to disperse each direction. And so what happens here on these hillsides that I've sat here and dropped milkweed and seen it, is that the scent or the molecules that are floating in the air when that wind pushes off and then that thermal rises is they'll hit and they'll spread out sideways. So what is that buck getting out of that? A lot of people think, oh, he's getting the scent over his back because the wind's pulling down over his back. Yes, that is the predominant way that scent is going to come to him. So he doesn't have to see up high. He can smell what's above him before he even sees it or hears it. So that's why he's going to sit here with the wind coming over his back. Well, why is he going to sit on a ridge? Why wouldn't he sit somewhere else? Well, that's because he's going to get that thermal rise. So he's going to smell everything below him. And then to an extent, he's going to get an opportunity to smell everything to his left and to his right that is sideways. Because what's going to happen is that wind's coming off, the thermals are coming up, it's hitting and it's colliding, and it's doing that across this whole ridge system. And then the wind and thermals are going to fight over each other, and it's going to have that sandwich take place all day long. So that's why on a day like today, you bump a buck or you bump a deer right off of a bed just like this. I'm telling you time and time again, this is why deer bed where they bed, is because they're getting the most out of their nose. That's the number one power that a deer has. It's almost like a superpower, is they can smell really, really good. And so if they can smell like 200 times what we can, then why would they not use that to their advantage? Yes, they can hear well, but they can smell even better. They can see okay, but they can smell even better. So they can smell the most, they can hear the next kind of in the middle, and then they can see the least, is kind of how I look. So you're always trying to beat a deer's nose, which is why we're going to have that next episode on scent control. And so again, you have the sandwich. You're looking for the sandwich, and it's going to change day to day based off of the wind. This is an east wind day. If we have a west wind day, those deer are not going to be bedded over here, most likely, unless they're bedding just right against something they really want to eat. They will go and move over to the other side of this ridge. So west wind is going to be pushing over their back. The thermals are going to be rising. They're going to hit that sandwich, and they're going to smell everything almost in a 360 encompassing way around them. So what I do to get in a deer's bedroom when it comes to this, and if you watch the episode that on Big Daddy, this is a perfect example of I did everything I was supposed to, and the buck did exactly what I wanted him to do. Unfortunately, there were some vines in the way, and I could never get a shot. But I had to watch that deer for like 2 hours, take a nap, scratch his back, do all the things, just lay there until coyotes bumped him up. But what I did is I sat on a side hill, because the side is going to be the least amount of smell that they have. I knew where there was a big concentration of big rubs. I knew where I had bumped him off close to there before. I had bumped him off further up the hill. Figured, hey, if I bumped him off there, I bumped him so hard, he's probably not going to come back to there. I'm not going to do a bump and dump there. I ran that ridge out and found what I was like, oh my gosh, I got to hunt here tomorrow. Backed out, came back tomorrow. What I did that morning is I sat down the hill and I sat down the side hill about 200 yards away, and I dropped milkweed. The sun came up. I dropped milkweed. Milkweed kept sucking down to the bottom because there was no thermal pull or evaporation pull. Drop, 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 drop. All of a sudden, milkweed started to go that direction, and then it came back up, and I saw it settle and just kind of float right to my left. I'm like, okay. I knew that the wind and the thermal sandwich would be taking place about this line of topography on the ridge. And so now what I've got to do is I've got to ease my way in and hope, because this is pre-rut, going into the rut, that he's coming back to bed late because he was out making scrapes or checking on his ladies or whatever he's doing. And hopefully I can sneak in. And it was about 40 minutes after daylight. I snuck in to where all those rubs were and those scrapes. And I climbed up the tree, and I hadn't been sitting there 30, 40 seconds. And all of a sudden I see his rack moving through and him come right up. He comes and he beds exactly where that thermal sandwich was taking place. That wind and thermal sandwich was taking place. 35 yards from me, couldn't get a shot. Most frustrating thing I've ever had happen, but it let me know what I was actually seeing happen with the milkweed was actually taking place, and that's where bucks are going to want to bed. So what I'm telling you to take away from this and all is get you some milkweed, start dropping it where you're hunting, and trust the milkweed. Don't go to your favorite tree. Don't go to your favorite spot. Don't go to what looks the prettiest. Don't go necessarily to the most sign, because the most sign may not be where you have the wind and thermal advantage. You might need to catch them coming or going. And so you have to understand where your scent is going with wind and thermals and that relationship to be able to have success. So if you have any questions, which I'm sure you will, please ask them. It's only going to help you. It's not only going to help you, it's going to help everybody that comes along and watches this behind you. But big takeaway, take milkweed. Don't go with your favorite spot. Go with what the milkweed's telling you to go with, and what that thermal and wind relationship is telling you to do, and hunt based off of that and where you think those deer are going to be at that part of the season. But I really hope that this has helped you, and that it helps you this season. Be sure to catch part 2 of our scent control episode in this 2-part little mini series here of helping you get ready for deer season this fall. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.